You can't keep a good ELSA locked down forever. When you try, you get ELSAConnect, where we all are here to meet each other. You get ELSA Table, where you get to hear about fabulous recipes and food journeys of other ELSAs. You get ELSA Reels, where you can talk about films. You get ELSA Books, and soon to come, ELSA Photography, Poetry, Music, and more workshops. Good evening, and welcome to this session of ELSAConnect, an initiative of the ELSA Bangalore chapter, and a place where ELSAs meet other ELSAs and get to know a little bit more about music, writing, art appreciation, bureaucracy, personal journeys, technical skills, financial acumen, and sustainable living. We are a sisterhood, supporting and enabling each other, debating and discussing, and sometimes disagreeing. A place where we feel we equally own and we're all equally invested in. We want to believe that we are defined by a desire to build better lives and become better versions of ourselves. Thank you for joining us on this session of ELSAConnect with Kiran, and I hand it over now to Monica to take it forward. Thank you.
Hi, everyone, and thanks Preeti. Thanks, everyone, for joining this session. It's my pleasure here to introduce Kiran Bhatia, who's from the Pol Science 73 batch. Kiran has a master's in social work. She's a development professional with 4 decades of international experience on gender equality and social inclusion, women's and children's rights, and protection from violence and harmful practices with voluntary organizations, governments, and international agencies. Kiran was the founder director of Sanjeevni, a pioneer mental health NGO in Delhi that offered paraprofessional and volunteer community mental health services. She also assisted in founding and supporting other such centers in South Asia. Kiran served for 10 years as the UNFPA Regional Gender Advisor for Asia Pacific and provided technical expertise for setting up services, crisis centers, and safe spaces for women and children survivors of violence, post-conflict, and disasters. Post-retirement, Kiran has worked in Cambodia, Laos, Nepal, and India, continuing her voluntary work as a gender consultant, mentor, and trainer for helplines and counseling centers, providing first-line support and counseling, particularly for survivors of violence. She's a founding member of the Bembala Foundation and recently designed and facilitated an online training for the staff of the National Women's Commission Nepal Helpline. Empathy is at the core of all that Kiran does, and she shares her insight and experience on the magical power of practicing empathy. Some of you may have attended the session she did on ELSAConnect a few months ago on suicide, which was really interesting and engaging. And looking forward to this conversation, Kiran.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you, ELSA. Thanks to the organizing team that has worked really hard behind the scenes, and to all of you who are present today. It's wonderful to be back. It's always nice to be with fellow ELSA friends, many of whom I've never met, some of you senior, some of you many years junior, but it's a great audience and I'm really honored that I have this chance. Thank you, Monica, for that very elaborate introduction, but more than anything else, today I'm speaking to you as a practitioner, as a person who has had the fortune through my work, through the helplines, through the counseling centers, and also in my work in the UN, to interact deeply with individuals, largely women, but also children in disturbed environments, and have the chance to work deeply with them, to experience the magic of empathy and learn on my feet, learn through practice, how this can make a huge difference, both in your interaction with somebody, but also in your personal reflection. So I'm very grateful to the volunteers that I've had a chance to work with and train, the people who've reached out for help where I've been available. And I thank each one of them with gratitude for giving me the chance to learn the skill, which makes it possible for me to share with you today. I'm not an academic expert, so please remember that I'm sharing this more from experience and bringing you some insights and knowledge that I've gathered along the way. Could we have the slideshow, please, Tanya? We have very little time, and the purpose, as was clarified, is really for us to learn and to practice. So I'm going to give you a little background on this word and what it means. I'm then going to try and make you do some exercises with me and also reflect together a little bit in depth on why it's important and what difference it can make. Could we have the next slide, please? So what is empathy? It's a word we've heard for a long time. And it's interesting when you look into the source of this word, you find that empathy comes from the Greek root pathos, which actually means emotion, feeling, suffering, or pity. But more than that, it was coined in 1909, as I read, translated from the German word Einfühlen. It's a beautiful word. Einfühlen literally means in feeling or feeling into. And the analysis of this word indicates that empathy is not just between two human beings or what we feel deeply within ourselves. It's also with nature, with art, with creative elements, with other living beings. And it's a chance to feel and with them. So the breadth of empathy is actually all encompassing, and it gives us a much more in-depth, colorful insight into understanding ourselves and the people we interact with. Could I have the next slide, please? It's interesting to see that in some languages, in kanji, the Japanese script, as you can see here, but also in Mandarin, the words and the characters they use for empathy are fascinating. As you see here, the letters that come together to make the word represent eyes to see, ears to hear, to focus, undivided attention, to use your mind to think and your heart to feel. It's a beautiful combination of the elements that make it possible to be empathetic and the ones that we will reflect on together. But in these two languages, it's really exciting to see how the characters bring it all together into fusion to make the word. Next, please. Empathy helps us as a first step to understand the difference between listening and hearing. We are hearing all the time, involuntarily, the noises, the chatter around us, kids at the dining table, colleagues chattering at the desk next door, the noise in a bus, and people talking to us where we're not really listening. It's unconscious, it's reflective, and most of the time we are unmindful. And very often somebody will say, "Did you hear what I said?" And we realize we didn't because we weren't really listening. But when we listen, it's a choice we make. It's a voluntary effort with a focus. It requires consciousness on our part to respond and to be with the person we're listening to. It involves physical movements in terms of eye contact, maybe body language, how you lean forward, how you sit. And it definitely involves your mental engagement. This sounds pretty basic, doesn't it? But you'll be surprised if you reflect back and you'll see when you're actually listening and when you're hearing. For empathy, we have to listen. It's a core requirement to us to be able to do that. And we listen not just with our ears, but also with our eyes, because our eyes teach us so much. Sometimes a person walks in for help in a counseling center. They haven't spoken a word, but observing how they're sitting, their facial expression, how they position themselves, their own eyes, tells you so much about them. So your eyes give you a lot of information to help you listen well. Your ears, of course, help you to listen in depth. And you need your heart as well to be caring and respectful. These are the core principles for counseling, but these are also the core principles for people like you and me, for every human being, to be more responsive and to be there for a person they're listening to practice empathy. Next, please. Very often, empathy is confused with sympathy. Would you agree? Is it true that very often we use them synonymously? I feel a lot of sympathy for this person. Poor chap. Right, Malika? And we don't use the word empathy so much, although more and more you start hearing it. Could I just go back to the sympathy slide? And here you notice there's a lot of caring in this person as their hand reaches out towards the person who looks upset. And they're thinking about the other person. And they're trying to identify and communicate their sympathy to this person. But when we look at the empathy slide, next please, you notice here that the person is at the same level. Their heart is engaged through respect and careful listening. their mind is also engaged in trying to analyze and relate to the words, but also the feeling that this person is communicating. It's very easy for us to confuse the two. Empathy requires us to suspend our judgment, to listen carefully. We have to be able to be with the person and put ourselves aside, but use our mental faculties to respond. It involves being able to paraphrase back to the person what they said to us so they know that we have understood them. If I say, I know you're feeling very sad. How will you know that I've really understood? But if I explain why I know you're feeling sad, the combination of my affirmation of the feeling, as well as the words played back in different words, but confirming what they've said, that reassures me that you have actually listened to both what I've said and how I feel. And when you do that, it is such a simple way to reassure me that you're really with me and that you're empathizing with me. So it is largely dealing with feelings, but it is also being able to communicate that back to the other person. Sympathy helps us acknowledge somebody's pain, which is good, but it's not enough, as we will see as we go along. Empathy has an enormous value, and I will be talking a little more about the value of this term and this experience for each one of us in our daily lives. But before that, since this is a gym, let's do a little practice and get you to do a little self-reflection on how you understand the difference between sympathy and empathy. Yes? Are you all with me? Yeah? Okay, Tanya.
Sure.
How about bringing up our Paul? So what we're going to do is we're going to give you a set of questions. And does the poll show up for everybody? Yes, Tanya?
No, Tanya, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
I'm facing the same problem that I did in the beginning when we were practicing.
You're not able to show the poll?
Oh, okay.
What can we do then? Can you?
Sandhya, is it possible? Sandhya, is it possible for you to show the poll?
Maybe. Or maybe Yumna, you can. Just run the poll.
Yeah.
Yumna, even you can, I think.
Can you see it now?
Is the poll?
I see the poll. Do you see it?
How many
Can you
people?
see it? No.
What happened? Okay, if you can't see it, I'm going to read out the questions to you.
Yeah, I think let's just do that.
Okay, I'm going to read out the questions to you, and I want you to write down somewhere, maybe on the chat, and tell us whether you think this is a sympathetic response or an empathetic response. Okay?
Yeah,
Can you do that?
that's good.
So
Yeah.
the first question, I wish I could take your pain away, dear. Is that sympathy or empathy? Maybe we can have people unmute and answer. We can make it interactive since we can't do the poll. I'm sorry about that. We'd hoped to do the poll. So 2 people are saying this is sympathy.
Empathy.
Empathy.
Many people are saying it's sympathy. Since we're going question by question, would somebody like to tell me why? Anyone?
You really can't take away the pain from anyone, right? I think that was what you said.
So basically you're expressing feelings for a person, but you can't take it further. Okay, yes, that is a very classic sympathetic response. You feel for the person, you tell them, I wish I could take it away, but there's no further step of how or going on the why. Second question, it sounds to me that you're really frustrated right now because of your situation at work. What is that? It sounds to me that you're really frustrated right now because of your situation at work.
That's more empathy.
Okay, why?
That is empathy.
Anybody, why?
Because you're just, I suppose you're just trying to tell the other person that I understand that you're frustrated at work, and that's why, you know.
So you're identifying their
Find the feeling there, yeah.
with this frustration, and you're also identifying why from the facts that they told you. So they may have told you over many sentences, but you're summarizing and saying that you're frustrated, and it's also because of the situation at work. You're responding to both. When you say that, the other person says, okay, this person is hearing me, they're with me. Archana, you feel it's none. Any reason why?
Yeah, I feel I'm judging a person and trying to, make a statement. It could be anything on the person's behalf. So if it's empathy, I would prefer to listen their point of view more and not make my own statements. That's why I feel it's none.
Good, Archana. I can clarify that. Very good point you've raised. But see the text, it says, it sounds to me. It's a question. It's not a statement. You're very fine.
Yeah. It's not written, so I'm just listening to what you're saying, and then.
I'm so sorry. What I read out was,
fine.
it sounds to me that you're really frustrated. So it's a very good thing you identified. You don't make a statement because that's closing the door. You make a statement in the form of a question, right, Malika?
Yeah.
That you ask
Absolutely.
and leave the door open for the person to correct you in case you misunderstood them. Excellent observation. Third question. I really feel for you. How awful that your boss has behaved this way. What's that? I really feel for you. How awful that your boss has behaved this way. Anybody? Sympathy, okay. Anybody
Sympathy again.
All right. Anyone?
Sympathy and judgment.
Right. So you're passing, what's the judgment? You're saying how awful, but you're being sympathetic for how awful you're feeling, but you're not taking it further in terms of any analysis or opening the door for them to tell you more. You can be sympathetic and move on. It's a sentence that doesn't lead a conversation. It closes a conversation. Yeah? Can I go to the next?
Yeah.
I understand you're in pain from what you've shared. You feel very angry and hurt that your friend betrayed your trust. Oh, you managed to protect it. Thank you. You can read it now, folks. I understand you're in pain from what you have shared. You feel very angry and hurt that your friend betrayed your trust. What is that? Anybody like to?
This is true empathy.
Anybody like to comment why? How do you feel it's empathy?
It's acknowledging what's been said and why that is so.
Right. It's bringing together the feeling of both pain and anger and feeling hurt and the reason why. So that will allow the friend to tell you much more than if you were just to say, I'm so sorry you're in so much pain. Right? Okay, let's go to the next one. Malika, you want to take the next one?
Oh, I'm so sorry you're in such a difficult situation. Sigh. Wish I could change your situation.
What's that? Anybody? Somebody saying sympathy. Any other comment?
Unhelpful sympathy.
You're sorry, that's nice.
Yeah.
Okay, but it doesn't help very much, right? Can you change somebody's situation? Is it possible?
No.
Is it possible for us to change somebody's situation? When you empower somebody, what do you do? What's your goal when you try and empower somebody?
We try to raise that person's level. So if a person's feeling bad, our objective should be to make them feel better. So when we are saying, I'm sorry that you are in that state, implies basically that I can't help you out.
Exactly.
I feel it that way.
Absolutely. And when you empower them, you find ways by conversation to help them find.
Yes, we would give them some suggestions and say, okay, you can do this, or maybe I can help you this way, rather than just saying, I'm sorry that you are in that state. So it's basically sympathizing, but not giving an alternative way of coming out of it.
Right. We'll come later to the.
Shafiq put a good point that it doesn't. It seems like it wants to end the conversation, which is, that's what it's doing. It's not encouraging further conversation on the same thing.
Excellent. Okay, let's go to the next one.
From all that you have explained, I can see that you are feeling very stressed, confused, and helpless about the confrontation with your sibling.
Any comment? Empathy says Ritu. Tanya also says empathy. Anyone else? Anuradha also says empathy. Yes, this is clearly empathy. It's a very complete sentence. Again, you're basing it on what you've understood from all that you have explained, leaving it open. I can see that you're feeling very stressed, confused, and helpless. You've identified 3 separate types of emotion this person has shared with you. They're all different emotions. You've been able to bring them together. And you've also given the reason that you've understood. And you're leaving it open as a question for them to clarify in case you've misunderstood your own conclusion of what they said. So it's a very good empathetic response. A response like this will help the person to go further and say, yes, exactly, and go to a deeper level and tell you more. And that will bring relief to them and also joy to you, because you'll see the relief on their face. And as we'll discuss in a minute, that makes you feel good as well. Okay, let's do the next one.
You poor thing. It is unbelievable that he should treat you and the children this way.
What is that? Just speak up, somebody. It's okay.
Sympathy.
Sympathy, sympathy.
We have very good students here. We don't need to go further with the session. We figured it all out.
Yeah.
It's quite obvious, the very fact that it begins with "you poor thing," you know,
Yeah.
But
that itself says it.
do you realize how often we say that? How often we say, poor you, that's awful. It's such a common statement we make. It's reassuring initially, but it doesn't help you much further. And Shafiqa is saying that sympathy, but not even in a good way. Correct.
Yeah.
It's almost condescending, isn't it? That it's you poor thing. It's unbelievable that he should treat you like this, like you poor thing.
I feel that a
Tanya,
statement
next
like
one.
this makes the person feel even lower. You feel low when you get a statement
Yeah.
like that from someone.
It's
Yeah.
also blaming, you know, it's also blaming in the sense.
Patronizing.
Right. So we mean well. Remember, the intent with sympathy is very good. It's good intent. You're not trying to belittle the person or be condescending. You mean well, but the impact is not the same as an empathetic response.
I understand how difficult this must be to talk about.
What's that? Anybody? Ritu,
It should be empathy.
Yumna, Anuradha. Why is it empathetic? Can somebody help me understand? What's empathetic about this?
You know, because I think you're having a conversation in which the person is kind of sharing something, and you are trying to, you're not saying that, you know, I totally am in your position. You're trying to say, okay, I'm trying to understand that this is difficult for you.
Exactly.
It will help them to open up.
Yeah.
Open up.
Absolutely. You start by saying, I understand.
Yeah.
And then you identify two things, the difficulty as well as the fact for them to open up more to you.
And talk to you. Yeah.
And that will encourage them to talk more. Absolutely. Next, please.
So sorry that you had a miscarriage. It's good that at least you have a son.
Rashmi is shaking her head. What does this mean? What's wrong with or good about the statement? It's reassuring. I'm saying, yaar, I'm so sorry that you had a miscarriage, but beta to hai. What's wrong with it?
Like you're kind of erasing the pain. You're saying, acha, you know, koi baat nahi, tap, tap. You know, this is not as bad as you think it is.
I'm trying to be positive and helping them look at the good things they have. I'm giving a silver lining, am I not? Is that not a good thing?
Why
I think
a
it's a
son?
negative sympathy because
Yes.
I don't know, somehow I feel it's negative.
This one is generating a lot of strong reactions on the chat.
Yes, it's kind of like, you know, I'm so sorry that you've had this death, but you know, get over it kind of thing. I mean, it's a little bit harsh.
Yeah.
It's a good intent, trying to buck the person up and making them think of what they have, but the way it's done doesn't have
Exactly.
that effect, right? It's something we do very often because it's hard to see somebody in pain. So we often say, buck up, be brave, smile. Every cloud has a silver lining, and we try and cheer them up. But it doesn't have that effect because we've not allowed that. Monica, you wanted to add?
Yeah, or I said sometimes you just, you can't stay with their pain, so you start talking about your own. Like, oh, you know, I also had a miscarriage and I came out okay.
Exactly.
You know, that sort of thing.
And that's taking the empathetic space away from them to yourself, which absolutely discourages further opening up and further sharing of, because the person is already vulnerable, right? So it's harder. Okay, let's move to the next one.
Let's do the last one.
The last one.
I'm very sorry for your loss. You know, when I lost my dad, I felt the same way. And this is how I dealt with it.
So that's exactly what you were saying earlier, Monica. You don't know how to deal. It's sometimes we're also very awkward about expressing our feelings when, you know, somebody suffered a loss. And deal with it by sharing our own story, which may be okay later in the conversation. But when you do it at a certain time when the person has not really shared all their feelings that are disturbing them, it doesn't help you to be empathetic. It actually blocks the conversation. And again, this is a very common response with good intent. We mean well, but sympathy doesn't take you forward. Sympathy stops where it is. It doesn't help us to go forward. It's not enough.
So
Okay.
Kiran, just a quick time check. We are at 4:30.
Oh my God. Okay. We have to move much faster.
Yeah.
We're going to show you a very short 2-minute video, which helps firm up the difference between sympathy and empathy. I hope you're able to show the video, Tanya.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
No.
This is by Brené Brown. And
So what is empathy?
Sorry, Kiran, you were saying.
No, please go ahead.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Thank you, Tanya. So Brené Brown has done incredible work on research, on empathy, on the vulnerability with empathy, and on the challenge of sharing a vulnerability, of shame. She's done years of research on shame, on what it takes for people to open up their vulnerability to another person. And only empathetic responses enable that. If I can just go back, we're very short of time, so I'm just going to do 1 or 2 more bits of information, and then we're going to go into our exercises. I hope everybody's enjoying the session. Is it going okay?
Yes.
Okay.
So what is empathy?
So levels of empathy is important. Can we go back? As you saw from this video, we need to remember that empathy is of many kinds. One, of course, is the emotional empathy, where we share emotion. The other person feels that we have understood what they're feeling. But in addition to that, there's also cognitive empathy, where we can identify with what others are feeling. We're able to use our mind and our skills and our brains to try and put together their feeling with a situation, with a series of situations. And then our concern is built because of that. And we're able to give express our empathetic concern, wishing to improve their experience. So therefore, it's much more than just feeling. It's much more than saying, I feel your pain. It's also bringing together these three elements, which confirms for the other person that you are there, you've understood them, and you want to be with them to help them move forward with sharing more and trying to find solutions for themselves. Okay. One important factor, can we move on, please, is that today there is a massive deficit of empathy. There's a huge volume of research by many researchers. I'll give you the names for you to Google and read more on your own. There are academicians, there are scientists, there are anthropologists, people who've written books and done decades of research to analyze what's happening with empathy in our societies. Ironically, Michelle Bober, who's an educationist, tells us that in the last 30 years, empathy has dipped 40% and narcissism is rise by 58%. This has many reasons, which I can't go into now, but the obvious ones are technology, the alienation that many of us have experienced as individuals within families, within our social systems. As we can see during the pandemic, we saw this very sharply, the huge rise in loneliness, the massive increase in calls to helplines, to suicide lines, to breakups in families, to violence within homes. There is a huge absence of anyone we can trust and talk to, and a complete void of empathy between individuals. This is very frightening data. And what's happened is that this particular person, Michelle Bober, has really worked hard in school systems and has built up a whole process within schools of teaching empathy to children, recognizing that empathy is a verb. That's the good news. It's something we can learn. It is a muscle that we can train. And just like our body is filled with muscles that we don't know if they exist till we go to the gym and they start paining, similarly, with training in a structured way, individuals and groups can train themselves to build their empathetic skills, to learn how to be inquisitive, to learn how to be non-judgmental, to learn how to validate what somebody says, to practice to be compassionate and to express that compassion and love in a constructive way, which will take forward relationships, interactions, and a much more healthy society. So it starts with an individual, but it has large social ramifications. And the other good thing, could we go to the next slide, please, that science has told us is that we have mirror neurons in our brain. So physiologically, psychologically, neurologically, at every level, we now have so much evidence about the fact that empathy can be mirrored. When somebody smiles at us, we smile back. When people laugh, we laugh. There's that famous story about in a tube when a guy starts laughing and people who were totally lost on their phones and depressed started laughing with him. So it is possible to mirror empathy, and therefore, if we can practice it, you can have such an important effect on others within your family, in your work situations, in almost every domain. It is possible to mirror it and allow empathy to be shared, both positive and negative feelings, both pain, anguish, anxiety, depression, but also joy and positive emotions, which help build and strengthen relationships. So that's the basis of empathy, and that's what allows us to know that it's dynamic, that it's not idle. Can I have the next slide, please? And we've learned a lot from this wonderful professor at Stanford called Jamil Zaki, who wrote a book called The War of Kindness. Do Google it and explore it more. I've read a lot of his work and based a lot of what I'm sharing with you from his readings and experiments. And he's the one who says it is like a muscle. So we can strengthen it and not allow it to go idle, because that's going to make a difference on the kind of life we have, but also the kind of life we influence for those around us. Training one's heart to see the humanity of another, Herzenbildung, is a beautiful German word which strengthens that. So it's not a feeling by itself, remember, it is something that we can magnify cognitively, emotionally for others. So let's move on to our exercises. We're very short of time. If you've got your pen and pencil ready and your paper ready, let me start you on your first exercise. Is everybody ready? I'd like you to sit back and reflect for a moment. I'm going to give you 3 exercises which I want you to practice next week. I want you to make a plan for yourself. And the first exercise is investing and spending. Everything costs time and money. Just like you plan your investments for your home, for your finances, this is to help you plan your emotional investment. The good news is that it brings back enormous dividends. It brings back a lot of very positive rewards for you as well as for others. So this is about how you think twice about spending because you know it's expensive. How are you going to spend your ability to empathize in the coming week so that it brings back an investment for you? Because we know that when you give joy, the mirror neuron gives you joy. When you see that somebody's feeling good because of your effort, you feel good. When somebody says, look, thank you for understanding me, it's not just they who feel good, you feel good. And that feeling releases energy within your brain, the oxytocin and other chemicals, which give you a wonderful feeling of joy. So it's an investment, not an expenditure. The task for you is identify how you will spend your empathy in the coming week. I want you to close your eyes and think of 3 different ways you will do that. Think of a person. I'm giving you examples. You will identify what is suitable for you. Think of an example of a person who you know has been wanting to talk to you, but you haven't found the time. Would you pick up the phone and call them? Will you take them out for a coffee? Will you go for a walk with them? Will you write them a long email? Think of a conversation you need to have with somebody in your home, which you've been avoiding. Think of sharing something which has been bothering you, which you've not been able to do. Identify the person, identify the how for yourself. Think of the method that you will do. You could also think of doing an act of kindness, because spending kindness brings joy, brings satisfaction. Maybe you want to donate something. Volunteer to do an act that you're wanting to do but not got around to. Support something which you've been meaning to but haven't done yet. Reflect on how you will do this, and please write down after you've done it how you felt. Did this make you feel happy? Did it bring you joy? Could you see the impact it had on the other person or the situation on yourself? Identify further actions you can do. And at night before you go to sleep, check in and tick off what you were able to do. At the end of the week, review your planning. That's your first exercise for practicing empathy. Everyone okay? Can I move on to the second? Any questions on this? If you have questions, ask me now because I'm moving to the next exercise. You okay? I don't see any questions.
Yeah, Kiran, you can move on.
Okay. Oops, I seem to have lost the...
Now speak with, not to someone you disagree with.
No, I've lost the Zoom connection.
No, we can hear you.
Yeah, but I can't see you.
You're here.
You can hear me fine.
Yeah.
The second exercise is speak with, not to someone you disagree with. We all have disagreements. We have filled with judgment, anger, annoyance at somebody who has not been able to respond the way we want, who is, we feel, being unkind, rude, unempathetic, disruptive. Could be at office, could be at home, could be in your work situation, could be with a neighbor, could be anywhere. How can you start a new dialogue with this person? How can you initiate a dialogue where you decide not to disagree? Your goal here is not to debate in the usual positions that you take, digging in your heels and promoting the baggage that you already have in this relationship. Your goal is to listen to their story, to put aside your judgment, to strengthen your curiosity to know more about their thoughts, their feelings, their reasons, and their concerns. In this meeting, it's about them, and you're doing active listening with the effort to be empathetic in spite of all the past anger and annoyance that you've had with this person. After having had this discussion, first I'd like you to close your eyes and identify this person. You can identify a group where this constant dialogue, unproductive dialogue has been going on, or identify a person. Please have that person in your mind and think through how you will change your dialogue with them, how you will stop and talk to them in a different way. Afterwards, the task, please note it down for you, is to reflect on how you felt. Did you gain new insights into them and into yourself? Did you have a more productive discussion? Did new points come out? Was it calmer, less angry, less volatile, less disruptive? Did you feel less stressed and more relaxed? And did you feel encouraged to try and speak again? Did it change the feelings between you and the feelings within you? And could you see from their response that they felt the same? Was there a difference? Try it and make a note through your self-reflection on how you concluded if there was any difference or not. I do want to say that there's not success every time. Just like when you go to the gym for the first time, the muscle gets sore and you avoid doing it again and you wait for it to heal. So you have to push yourself and make the effort to try and practice it again. But do make notes for yourself to see how you feel. I'm trying to join the meeting again. If somebody can let me in. Can you hear
You're
me?
actually in the meeting, Kiran. So if
You're
you
in the meeting, Kiran.
if you do Alt Tab on your computer, or if there's a button to show you all your windows, because you're there, you're just on a different screen, I think.
That's so weird. I'm looking at all the tabs, but anyway, never mind.
We can see you and hear you very well, Kiran.
That's so weird. I cannot see you at all. Sorry about that. Okay, let's go to the third exercise if you all are okay. Yes, can I move on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
The third exercise is in some ways the most critical. And the third exercise is how can you practice kindness to yourself, building your empathy muscle to apply to yourself. Each of us carries many different burdens of guilt, many vulnerabilities of past chapters which have been painful, past experiences that we harbor in our heart and have not shared for a long time over the years. Buried inside is anger that is bottled up, depression, hurt feelings, all of them are sitting inside us and erupt suddenly at some points. Also, in our patriarchal structures, very often, especially women, are filled with a lot of guilt about expectations of how they're supposed to behave, how they're supposed to not behave, and the pressure of their own identities and feeling of imperfection, low feelings of self-esteem. There's such a host of complex feelings each of us has at our own level, based on our upbringing, the culture we've grown up in, the experiences we've had, our current life situation. We also have a pressure for perfectionism. We want to be perfect. We have a pressure to do better. And this pressure comes from every facet in our upbringing, from our parents, from the messages we have in our brain. And we never often feel that we've not lived up to our own expectations. So here's a chance to try and treat yourself more kindly. Kindness is at the heart of being empathetic. If we can't be kind to ourselves, it's not going to be possible to be empathetic to others. Treat yourself as you would treat others. Here's the exercise that you need to do. Imagine if your neighbor or your friend or someone you care for is disturbed. How would you treat them? How would you respond to them? How would you reach out to them? Now imagine that they are doing that to you. How would you like them to treat you? Experience that feeling. And then that's exactly what you need to do for yourself. Picture a situation where a neighbor needs your help, your support, and you provide it. Try and identify a feeling within you which you feel pulls you down, and apply that same caring to yourself. Imagine how you would listen and be kind to yourself, how you would forgive some of the imperfections that you identify in yourself, how you would accept that you've made a mistake or that you felt humiliated, how you would think about that it's okay not to be okay sometimes because you are a human being and every human being has such moments in their life. How would you say that it's all right and I will find a way to put this for the moment, it's okay for me to feel like this. Try and think about that for a moment. And then Write down for yourself, what are the issues for which you were kind and forgiving to yourself? What issue did you recognize as an imperfection that you would like to accept within yourself and the reasons why it happened? And how would you calm yourself to say that human beings face this situation? It's okay. Most important, recognize that within you are also a whole set of resources, of strengths, of knowledge, of abilities that will help you cope with the situation. Recognize that you don't want to burn out, that there is a time when you have to step back and care for yourself, and it's okay to do that. Practice this once a week and see what are the issues that come up within you. Write them down and revisit the earlier week to see how you feel. So I hope you've been able to write down 3 exercises for yourself. Just to summarize, the first is investing and spending your empathy on somebody and finding little ways in which you want to do that 2-3 times a week and making notes on how that went. Secondly, seeing how you were able to deal with the disagreement in a completely different way. And thirdly, how you would practice kindness towards yourself. 3 important exercises. Along with this, something you can do as a fun exercise, all of us can do, I'm just going to end with that, is that you can be a very important agent for empathy, which means you can build a culture of empathy where you work. Many of you are in such outstanding senior leadership positions in your organizations, in your homes, as senior members of your households, in your neighborhoods and communities where you work. Applaud and honor an act of empathy that you observe. Don't be a bystander. Honor it, recognize it, point it out to others. React and don't be a bystander when you see somebody who's being non-empathetic. If there's an act of callousness which puts somebody down, react to it, don't be a bystander. So you can contribute every day in little ways to creating a culture of empathy wherever you are. And that's something you can do at any time and carry that gift with you. It's really easy. Once you find it, it's like a hologram. Once you see it, it's always with you. And it's really not difficult. I want to share very quickly, I know we are well past the time, but the reason I say this to you with confidence is because of when we do our training for our volunteers in our different helplines, in our centers, these are ordinary men and women from various walks of life. As they discover the joy of caring for somebody, the joy of befriending, they are able to see the transformation within themselves. And you see those things opening. When you mentor them and they talk to you, they tell you, I never realized I had this patriarchal attitude. I never realized I was so judgmental about this. I never had insight that something like this made me so angry because of this experience I had. So the personal growth by empathizing with somebody is phenomenal. And it's a double benefit for them and for you because you learn so much more about yourself and all the complex realities within yourself, which is such a wonderful journey. So I hope this little attempt, it's been very little time, will help you reflect on your own journey. And I hope you'll keep a diary and see how you do with these 3 exercises. And just the last slide from the Dalai Lama, if we can see that, please, which tells you that looking at various means of developing compassion, and you know the Dalai Lama speaks so much about compassion. Empathy is a very important factor. The ability to appreciate others' suffering. And I think I should end with that because we need time for questions. Thank you for listening to me so patiently. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Kiran, for that awesome session and for reminding us that, you know, everyone we meet is fighting some battle that we may know nothing about. And so it's so important to kind of be kind and empathetic in your everyday moments all the time. So thanks for that reminder. We'd be happy to take any questions that you may have. We'll request you to turn on your cameras and ask your questions, send them in the chat box, and also then turn them on and ask your questions. We have a question from Shafiqe. Shafiqe, would you like to turn on your camera and ask the question?
Sure. Hi, Kiran. Hi, Malika. Thank you for a
Hi.
wonderful session. I was just curious about narcissism because you said narcissism and empathy are kind of opposites in a way. Is narcissism selfishness, self-centeredness? How do we recognize when we're coming from that space?
Thanks, Shafiqa. I can answer it very briefly, but this is pointed out in the research that I mentioned with this lady who did studies in schools, education systems about the shift in children. And she links it a lot to technology. But basically, it shows that everything in our life is pushing us to look after ourselves. There's so much increase in competition. There's so much pressure for performance. There's so much preoccupation because everything is online. And there's so much artificiality in how we communicate. So much on Facebook and all the social media is through emojis. It doesn't really say how we are, what we feel. It's not real. And so the preoccupation with self is very self-directed and almost unreal. It doesn't allow the kind of quality interactions with other human beings that allow us to be empathetic, that allow us to learn empathy. It has to be learned and practiced. It's not a given, it's a dynamic tool we have, which we have to develop. So narcissism has, I won't go into the clinical definitions, but basically, in simple words, it means that we're always looking inwards and looking at ourselves and are so preoccupied with that we don't have the space, the gunjaish, the interest to engage deeply and to invest, to spend on others, spend emotionally on others. I'm not sure if that answers your question. Okay.
Thank you for that.
Just a second. So Vinita Sethi, want to come on?
I see the question.
Hi, Kiran. This was really nice, though I missed a little bit in the beginning. My question is like this, that even in teams, as you said, be an empath and applaud. Don't be a bystander.
Yeah.
The problem I feel is there are so many factors and, it could be either simply out of convenience. You want to be just there watching things, or out of fear of being singled out, or, it could just lead you into bigger troubles.
Sure.
So I don't know whether I'm a team lead or a member of a team. The biggest fear in being a supporter of an empath where you would be in minority is the unfortunate thing of taking the, resentment at times, though there will be applause later on. What could be a very good exercise for a team and not just the leader?
Sure.
Move together in this direction.
It's a really good question, Vinita. And I just want to reassure you that, all the top business schools, a lot of the corporate world has learned its lesson. When they discovered, for example, that EQ is more powerful than IQ. And they realize that hiring people who have EQ is much better because they're better team players, they're more stable as personalities, they're better at problem solving, they're more balanced, even though they may not be as brilliant in their IQ. The same way, now empathy is given very high value in the corporate world. And even Harvard Business Review has written so many articles. There's so much recognition in the helping profession, almost every domain, that people who are empathetic make things work. So there are also a lot of exercises, as you said, in the team building, like trust exercises. We use that in many of our NGOs in our training. We use self-care exercises. At the end of every training session, we have 20 minutes for self-care, because we recognize that we often ignore our own needs, as I mentioned in the third exercise. So bringing in exercises which deal with feelings, which give a chance for people to share at a different level, strengthens empathetic presence in a group. You could, of course, invest in strategizing that, work with a smaller core group, get their buy-in in designing these exercises, introduce them in a first round, analyze it after, and build it up. My experience is that trust exercises, some of the exercises always bring positive results. It helps people open up, it helps people strengthen trust in each other, communicate better. They don't go wrong. What can happen is that some people are very vulnerable and need additional support on the side. So you do have to make arrangements for that. People might break down because it opens up domains that they have not opened up earlier. So you do need to plan it so that you have support mechanisms in place for people who might require it. I can send you some links.
Please do. I work in healthcare, and what I've seen is complete. I work for Apollo, and the complete breakdown today of trust between all stakeholders, be it the caregivers, the doctors, the nursing, the GDAs, the patients, you know,
I'd love to talk to you, Vinita. Sorry to interrupt you, but I've just finished a training for 50 doctors and nurses for the National Health Mission of Karnataka, complete government organization on violence against women, and how healthcare providers are supposed to respond through empathy. We did a 5-day training of trainers.
Yeah.
Be amazed at how these doctors and nurses came around. We did very complex trust exercises.
Kiran, I take your link from the ELSA Bangalore team. I think
I just want to give you the strength by telling you that WHO has now a global curriculum, which every government is required to follow, which has a methodology called LIVES, LIVES, which is listen, investigate, validate, empower, and support. It's a core requirement for every healthcare provider.
Not built into the DNA of anybody, you know, that's my whole question. It's so beautiful in words and in presentations, but I see a complete breakdown, you know. So anyway, I won't take more time. And this is also a question which applies to every other team. You know, I mean, it's every other team, every other association, every family, every community. So thank you so much, Kiran.
Very good question, man. It's hard work. I agree. It's not easy.
Thanks, Vinita. Any other questions? So while we're waiting for some more questions to come in, I want to invite Nivedita to just announce the next session. Nivedita? Nivedita, are you there? I don't see Nivedita there. So does anyone from the ELSAConnect team want to announce the next session?
I think Sandhya has another question.
Yeah. It's actually a very basic question, Kiran, that I've been wondering.
There's no basic question. Every question is okay.
We say that we can't try and change someone, or we can't try and change something for them. Yeah. So are we then hoping that just by putting ourselves in their shoes and giving a listening ear, just that process is enough to help them feel better?
Yeah, actually, that's a good point you raised. The truth is we can never change anybody. The accountability of changing is always with the person. We can be a sounding board, we can be a support, we can be the mirror neuron for them so they can, and as people share and empathize more, they relax, and through the process of dialogue, discover their own solution. We can help them explore options and the pros and cons, but you can actually never take a decision for somebody or tell them what to do, because finally they have to do it and they have to own it. So giving them the support is an essential first step. Taking it forward will depend a lot on their decision. And here we have to respect the right of each person to make that call. And it's sometimes very sad because you're there, but the person is not willing to move forward. Your contribution is to help them know that you're there.
I also feel that I am often the younger person in age, in terms of the person for whom I'm being this person and being the sounding board. So I also struggle with that, where I can't really ask them to act upon something. So that's why, anyway. Yeah.
I think, Kiran, you brought up a really important point about, you know, ultimately it's their agency to do whatever they need to do for their world. You can't control any of the parameters in their world, and you don't need to. You just need to be with them.
Right. I want to add something. This is not a question, but I just want to say, you know, human beings are different. Every individual has a different personality. And many times people may come to you as real friends to hear you out, but they may not be the ones who are really aiming to help you. So that is one thing that we have to be very sure of. Like, I may go out to help someone in the right intention, may help them, but there may be another person who may come for them, listen to what they have to say, hear the emotional thing, and go and spread some news about it. So that is also very dangerous. I think that is one reason why many people don't open about their issues, their problems, because they're not sure whether the other person is going to be the right person to share their emotions with.
I understand your concern. I understand what you're saying, Archana. And I just want to clarify that trust is not easy to build. And we have a right to be reassured about the trust, about confidentiality. And we have to feel comfortable before we open up more.
Yeah.
And when you feel somebody's being empathetic, you will know. We all make mistakes. You may trust somebody who betrays you, yes. You may also be in a relationship where through the dialogue you realize that it's toxic and it's not good for you. And that's okay. It's good to recognize that. A dialogue and self-reflection, especially the last exercise, will help you recognize that to be kind to yourself, you need not continue this dialogue. That's also being kind to yourself and having that dialogue in a timely, constructive way so that you can protect yourself and take care of yourself. So knowing who to trust comes with genuine empathy. You will know. It's your heart, brain, and your feelings that will guide you and tell you. It's very hard to pretend about that. And you may be fooled about it once or twice, but you will really know. And it takes a lot of courage to open up. Think of the strangers who call a helpline or who walk into a place and share their innermost secrets. Imagine how vulnerable they feel, how hard it is to share some of the most painful realities of your life.
So true. But what I feel is, even like if we go out to help people, that has to be in our minds that what they're sharing with us is something very private, and we don't open up to other people and talk about their issues, because then they lose trust in us too. So that is very essential, that we as individuals, when we go out to and approach someone to help them out, we need to keep that as a secret to create that kind of trust.
Absolutely.
I think trust is at the core of being able to offer some empathy. Trust is absolutely essential. So Parul says investing in people and emotions always bear good dividends. So thank you, Kiran, for that session. Shafige has one more question. Shafige, would you like to ask him?
Sure, Shafige.
Hi, I was wondering, are there conceivably any situations where an empathetic response is not appropriate and one should respond differently? Or is this kind of stepping back from when someone's interacting with you and just listen to them, is this always the way we should be with people?
My experience is that an empathetic response almost always works. Of course, you have to be aware of the situation. If somebody's being obnoxious to you or is being very angry, you have to make a call on whether they are open to receiving an empathetic response. But it's also true that your response makes a big difference. And the challenge, Safige, is not to own their negative feelings and make them yours, which is what happens when we get caught in difficult interactions, isn't it?
Yes, that's...
You made me very angry. We are in charge of our own emotions and nobody can make us angry. We choose to be angry. And we need to reflect on what makes us angry and manage that for ourselves. Nobody else can manage that.
However, there are people who are manipulative and know how to push other people's buttons.
Yeah,
someone knows that you're sensitive about a particular issue and will just keep doing that. So
that's where your self-kindness comes in. The third exercise is very important. It's a very important exercise to know when to protect yourself, when to withdraw, when to be kind to yourself and not get beaten every time in that interaction. Because you know that's going to play out. I don't know if I answered it. Monica, you want to?
No, I understand. Yeah. I think it was very, very, very good to hear this.
Yeah, it's important to be able to draw our own boundaries, right?
Exactly.
So we don't offer ourselves at the expense of ourselves.
There's a very nice question from Vandana. It's a tough one, Vandana. How does one?
Before that, there's one from Yumna.
It's okay. Yumna first.
Yeah, Yumna, go ahead.
I was going to say, I was very surprised to learn that willpower is a finite resource and that you can actually, run out of it if you keep pushing yourself all the time. I think I disbelieved it the first time I heard it. But is empathy different in that regard that, or is it as long as you keep that third thing of self-care, it renews and regenerates automatically and quickly?
Very good point, Yumna. And, as I mentioned, we do a lot of self-care. And during the pandemic, there are so many examples of people who worked with frontline staff in hospitals who were seeing death every day and who were burning out, who were breaking down. So with all the good intent, we have limitations as human beings. And we need two things. As we need knowing our own limits and how to protect ourselves to avoid burnout. And we need the support, timely support, to help us cope. No matter who we are, none of us are perfect and we all need support in different ways. So it does run out. But when you provide empathetic response, it mirrors in you and it rejuvenates. So you get so much dividend, as I said, you spend it and you get so much more back. When you see a person, you see the result in them, you see them taking a decision or a step forward, or you see a conversation change, it gives you enormous joy. It gives you a feeling of inner satisfaction that is really hard to describe. And that makes you feel so good. So that strengthens you. That's re-energizing you. That's refueling your wish to do more of that. And balancing that with your self-protectiveness should make it work. But it does deplete and you do burn out. Especially for that profession.
Yeah, just to...
Thanks, Kiran.
It's called compassion fatigue also, where you don't, whether you're too compassionate and you get tired of it. But I have to say that on a day when, I'm a counselor, and on a day when I've seen like 6 clients, which means basically 6 hours or 7 hours of work, those are the days when I feel the most energized. So, it does kind of pay back to you.
Right.
Vandana, do you want to come up with your...
Yep. Thanks, Kiran, Malika. It's been absolutely wonderful. This is a space where one gets stuck quite often. I'm talking myself personally. Is that how do you and what do you say to, how do you empathize with someone who's fighting a terminal disease or someone who's lost a loved one? How do you sort of approach it? Appreciate your guidance.
A wonderful question, Vandana. I'd like to open it up to others. Anyone who wants to respond. How do you think we can deal with that?
I think we should just be there for them. That's it. Don't say anything, just be around. Help them in whatever they want to. Spend quality time with them. Cheer them up by doing things for them. That's the only thing. Don't make any statements. Don't say we are sorry, or don't say this will pass or whatever. Just be there for them.
I would like to hear, Kiran. I am confused. Yeah. I don't know how to react. My own father is in terminal illness. If I overhelp, I feel I'm doing disservice to him. But if I just let it be, it's not easy. I would like to take your view on this.
Malika, do you have a comment?
No, I was just saying that I think one thing we have to remember is that an empathetic response doesn't mean we solve the problem or we can solve the problem.
Exactly. Thank you.
We don't have the ability to do that. We just need to be there with them.
Thank you, Monica.
To talk to them, to be there for them, to pour their heart out, for them to cry, for them to, talk about their deepest fears, whatever. We can't solve the problem and we don't have to.
And that applies to every other situation. We imagine.
Yeah. That we need to solve the problem. In fact, that stops us from being empathetic to partners, stops us from being empathetic to children more than anybody else. Because parents feel they need to solve the problem. So they can't, they are not listening. They're just hearing it and they're having their response ready in their mind. I can't do anything about it. So what should I do? You don't need to do anything about it. You just need to be there.
Thank you, Monica. What's interesting is everybody will say, I don't know what to do. Please tell me what to do. And people look up to you for advice, and it's so tempting to give advice, and all of us are giving advice all the time. But then we find they go and do something quite the opposite. So giving advice is really not the solution because they have to choose what they're going to do. You can help them explore options, as I said earlier, and they have to own the decision. It has to be theirs. In this case, it's a different question. Coming back to this, as you said rightly, being there, being present is a huge contribution already. Just being there helps a lot. Often the need to say something is our problem, not theirs. We feel helpless. We feel disturbed that, what can I say to make them feel better, knowing that it's such a difficult situation and that there's no solution to it. We just have to help them cope with the situation. So it's more our own discomfort. So what can we do? We can be kind and deal with our discomfort, empathize with ourselves, identify the feelings we are having, and try and change those feelings when we are with the person. And try and see which responses of ours make them feel calmer. Because you can't change the situation, right? That's already a given. But your presence, try and change within yourself how you feel about it. Because that's influencing how you respond all the time. And it's a horrible situation, I've been through it, where you feel completely helpless and powerless. With all the love, you can't do anything. It's a terrible feeling. So it's good to talk about it to somebody and figure out how you deal with that feeling for yourself. That's a big thing you can do, to be more calm when you're in their presence.
Thanks, Kiran.
It's training. It's not difficult. It's just training. Sorry.
Thanks, Kiran.
Thank you.
I want to invite Tanya to announce the next session.
Thank you, Monica. And thank you, Kiran. It has been lovely. And very sorry for all the technical glitches.
It happens.
Our next session is with Mumukshu Mohanty. She describes herself as an author, a chai lover, and a mom. And she will be talking to us about the art of storytelling and how to write your own story. So we'll see you not the next Saturday, the Saturday. Yeah, we'll see you on the 13th at 4 o'clock with Mumukshu Mohanty. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your patience and your participation. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We can stay and have an informal discussion if you like. We'll turn off the YouTube.